Most checkmates are a simple conclusion to a well-played chess game. However, these are the rare moments when chess grandmasters shock the world with impossible checkmating patterns that nobody expected. From a queen sacrifice mate to a genius mate in 11 moves. Starting with this game. It is the World Chess Championship of 2016, and Sergei Karyakin is trying to become the World Chess Champion in a game against none other than Magnus Carlsen. Little does Sergei know that he is about to experience the most devastating mate in his life. Magnus starts the game with e4, and Sergei responds with c5. After both players develop, we see the Sicilian defense on the board with players' knights on d4 and f6. Both players develop their pieces, and Sergei scares Magnus's knight away by playing pawn to a4. There is some more shuffling of the pieces happening on the board, and Magnus forks Sergei's queen and knight with pawn to b4, forcing him to respond with en passant and preventing the fork. Magnus continues to put pressure on Sergei, and finally, after a series of exchanges, Magnus advances his knight to b4. Magnus has some nasty tactics prepared for Sergei. Sergei responds with rook to a3, knight captures bishop, queen captures knight, and knight to b5. Magnus knows that if Sergei captures his pawn on b3, he will be met with a devastating fork on the queen and the rook. Sergei must play rook to a1 and exchange rooks to stay afloat. But Sergei does not realize what Magnus has up his sleeve and decides to capture the pawn. Knight d4, queen captures pawn, knight captures rook, queen captures knight. All of a sudden, Magnus is up this exchange and is looking for a finish. He is offering Sergei an exchange of rooks which is rejected because Sergei is not satisfied with a draw. Sergei wants to become the world chess champion and thus retreats his rook to a7, rook d5, rook c7, and queen to d2, stacking the pieces. Queen to f6 and rook to f5, threatening the queen. Sergei retreats and Magnus is looking to trade rooks again. Sergei escapes and Magnus wants to trade queens. He knows that he will become the world chess champion even if he makes a draw. But Sergei is looking for a win and makes a deadly mistake. He starts by checking Magnus with his rook, and after Magnus retreats, plays queen to f2, looking to checkmate by playing queen to g2. He thinks that Magnus will start defending, giving Sergei an advantage. But it is at this moment that Magnus sees the impossible checkmate. Rook to c8, check. King to h7. Sergei can still not anticipate what is about to happen. He thinks he is completely safe, but this next move is devastating. Magnus sacrifices his queen to finish Sergei. If Sergei captures with his king, rook h8 is mate. If he captures with his pawn, rook f7 is mate. It is at this moment, just one move before the mate, when Sergei resigns, letting Magnus keep his world chess champion title. But this next mate is even more insane. In this game, Liren Ding is playing Ian Nepomniachtchi to become the world chess champion of 2023. Liren starts the game with d4 and Ian responds with knight to f6. After some development, the players end up in the open London game. Bishops are traded in both players' castle. Liren gets his knight into the center of the board, threatening Ian's knight, and Ian is forced to retreat. Liren continues his attack by pushing the pawn to a4, and Ian responds with a6, kicking away Liren's bishop. It is at this point in the game that Ian will make his first mistake. He sets his knight back to d6. The idea is to trade knights and take control of the center. However, the big problem is that after the knights are traded, Ian's queen is pushed to the back of the board, weakening his position. And after some further pieces shuffling, Liren knows it is his time to crush Ian. He is in a totally dominant position as he puts his knight on c5. Ian does not have a lot of options here because his pieces are stuck, so he decides to push his pawn to e5. Liren gives away his pawn on the edge of the board and recaptures the pawn in the center with the rook taking e5. Ian moves his queen out of trouble and Liren threatens Ian's knight. Knight to c4 and bishop takes knight, resulting in an exchange. The position is not looking good for Ian and he should aim to create a draw, but this is when Ian makes another deadly mistake. Liren pushes his pawn, attacking Ian's bishop. The only good move for Ian was to take the rook on e5. Then Liren would have been forced to take with his pawn, and after queen to d8, the pawn takes bishop, and Ian can continue checking the king on d1 and h5 until the game becomes a draw. However, Ian decides to go bishop d2, allowing Liren to collect his b7 pawn. The knight is threatened by the queen, and Liren finds an amazing escape. He plays his knight onto d6. Ian is frustrated because his queen can't take the knight, or he will be checked with Liren's rook and will lose his queen. The game continues, and after Liren plays his queen to g3, he realizes, even though he is winning, he is short on time and has only 18 minutes to finish his next couple of moves. Not only that, Ian's passed pawn on a6 is ready to be promoted to a queen. Liren has to act now. Ian starts to push his pawn and the knight takes c4. Ian continues to push the pawn. The pressure is on and Liren is visibly nervous as he is trying to find a way to finish this match. Knight drops back. He is only 2 squares away from promoting. Liren is playing rook c7, threatening mate. Ian has to react and can't push his pawn, playing rook to g8 and protecting his king. Knight to d5. If Ian pushes the pawn now, the knight will take on f6 with a check, so Ian is forced to retreat. Knight to e7 gains him some extra time, and Ian goes rook f8. At this stage, Liren becomes absolutely brutal. He sees a checkmate nobody even remotely thinks is there. Pawn to d5. Wait, what? Pawn to a2 is knocking on the door, but Liren is confident by playing queen to c7. If Ian promotes, Liren will play knight to g6 with a check, ready to mate on g7. Therefore, Ian has to defend his king to h7, knight to g6, and rook to g8. In this position, white is losing, but there is one move, a move that only Liren was able to spot from a mile away that leads to a forced checkmate. Queen f7. It is at this point that Ian resigns because the queen is about to take the rook. King takes queen, and after rook to a8, Ian can only escape to either h7, rook h8 mate, or he can escape to f7, rook to f8 mate. Notice how the genius pawn on d6 blocks the only escape route available. Liren gets his World Chess Champion title, definitely well deserved after one of the most spectacular mates in the history of chess. But if you thought that mate was insane, hold on to your seat, because this next game has a forced mate in 11 moves that shook the entire chess community.
G7 on the board. Rustam's checkmate.
In this game, Jan Krzysztof Duda is playing Anish Giri in the Meltwater Championship. Jan starts with c4, and we see Rogozhin's defense on the board. Players exchange pawns and bishop g6, followed by some further pieces getting shuffled across the board. Jan plays pawn to e3, followed by pawn to h5. Anish is looking to trap Jan's bishop. However, Jan completely ignores the threat and plays pawn c4. Anish traps the bishop with h4, bishop e5, and f6. Anish has no idea that things are about to get really bad for him. Jan captures on d5, and while the bishop is captured by Anish, Jan plays bishop b5, check. Anish is forced to move his king out of the way, sacrificing his position. Remember this move because it sets up a deadly mate at the end of this game. But none of the players anticipate the mate at this point of the game, and the king has to retreat, allowing Jan to capture the e5 pawn. Both players continue to shuffle their pieces until they get to this position. Jan starts smiling as he is sacrificing his rook, but Anish looks confused. Jan has just spotted a forced mate in 11 moves that nobody saw coming. Anish captures the rook, still very confused, as Jan's smile gets bigger with every second. Pawn to f6. Now Anish starts to smile as well. He notices the checkmate too, but lets the sequence play out on the board. King to h6 as Jan is sipping his English breakfast tea. Knight g4, king g5, queen f5, sacrificing the queen, knight takes queen, rook takes knight. The rook is now protected by the bishop. The king can't take the knight because of pawn h3, mate, so he retreats to g6, rook e5, with a discovered check. It is at this point that Anish resigns because it is mate after king f7, rook e7, king g8, knight h6. A truly fascinating mate in 11 by Jan that left everybody smiling. Subscribe to Rook's Room if you enjoyed this video for more chess content, and see you very soon.